I'm Professor Sally Eaves, and it's a real delight to be here today with Lanny Cohen, who is CIO at Capgemini. And one of the things we wanted to talk about was about digital transformation and innovation. And obviously there's a great wave of change at the moment, probably never unprecedented times really in terms of rate of change. And there are many challenges from leadership, from governance, from geography choices, and also around customer engagement and levels of experience. So from your point of view, I just wanted to dive in a little bit and look at some of those challenges. And for me, I thought maybe as a starting point in terms of applying innovation, AI is probably the one that's most hoped, but also sometimes most feared as well. So that could be a nice point to dive in on.
Yeah, well, thanks, Sally. Appreciate
Pleasure.
the opportunity to chat with you too. I think it's kind of interesting because I think, if we look kind of in the past, I think the challenges around innovation, transformation, weren't so much around the challenges of adoption and applying it and consuming it. It was much more around getting access to
Indeed,
it. I mean, that was kind of the big
absolutely.
story. And I think, what we see now is really challenges as companies kind of look ahead and they see the disruptive and transformational impact of all this change. Are they really ready for it? I mean, have they really built the enterprise for this kind of future versus the past that they've come out of? And I think, you bring up AI, and AI is a great example because AI, I think, just confounds the problem even that much more. I mean, all the hype about fear and problems and jobs being taken away and that type of thing, it just adds a layer of, additional complexity and anxiety into the equation, which
could not agree more.
Roughens it up more.
And I think like every media headline you see, particularly when it comes to AI, they'll pick out that one sentence, even if it's a subset of a particular job role, for example, and it'll be jobs like, words like elimination or destruction. And unless you're closely involved in it, it's quite understandable where resistance of change can really come to the fore. So yeah, for AI, for me, is a big one. And also really like the integration of different technologies. I'd love your view on that. I think sometimes we talk about one particular tech discipline, so whether it's AI or blockchain or cloud, and not necessarily how they all fit together, and what underbeds the different technologies. And so the rise of 5G was another one that really excites me from a transformational point of view.
It's a great point. When we started on this applied innovation journey, we started to look at what are the barriers or flipped around the enablers that make adoption, that much more certain or be able to move faster or scale better. And we looked at kind of 10 primary variables. And one of the ones that was kind of near and dear to my heart was something I called digital core.
Okay.
Because it was really around kind of the stack, the platform, all the technology wherewithal, the architectures, if you will, to begin to make these things actually fit and work together. Because you're right, I mean, so much in the past was these single domains, set it up and kind of you're off to the races. And now, the complexity really lies in those challenges. And one of the things we've spent a lot of time on is this concept of architecting for change.
Absolutely.
How do you actually architect to evolve?
Absolutely, it's a craft, isn't it? I couldn't agree more. And I also think as well, so look at focusing on the tech is one thing, but focusing on the culture alongside the tech change is the other area to really apply innovation. And I think even now, I've been looking at research over the last 40 years about IT and business alignment, and I think even now we haven't changed that much in terms of the influence on culture and human factors on tech buy-in and how that really leads to sustained applied innovation. So I think that's a really interesting point.
We see so many studies come out over and over again, and we've been at these topics now for so long, and everybody knows they're important, and everybody sees the disruptive, either challenge back to the enterprise, or the enterprise needs to seize the moment. But it's just fascinating to me that over and over again, it's still the same barriers that prevent us from moving forward, and we just don't seem to tackle those in mass. Kind of know they're there.
Yes.
I don't think we're burying our heads, but at the same time, we're not really hitting them head on.
What's your perspective on the skills gaps? I would probably phrase it. For me, I think AI, maybe blockchain and cybersecurity are the three areas where they're the biggest skills gaps. And that, for me, for an innovation issue, long term could be where we'll get a perennial problem unless we kind of address that now. Have you got a particular view on that one?
Well, I think you're right. I mean, I think those three are certainly fundamental, but I think that there's a series of skills that sit above those and a series of skills that sit below them. The ones above it, does the enterprise really have the digital literacy and the digital wherewithal, to embrace the change and make the change? You alluded to it before. Do they have the kind of business alignment? And I look at that as really a competency or a skill. And then do they have the fortitude and the will to move at the kind of speed and embrace these things they have to? So that's kind of at the top end. Got the technology, and then below it, I mean, things like Agile
Yes.
and DevOps
Yes.
and those things that really allow an IT organization to move at the kind of breakneck speed and
Absolutely.
and flexibility that they're going to need to support the business.
Yeah, so I think we're kind of saying really, I think the word ambidextrous springs to mind for me.
Not
I
a
think,
bad way to
yeah,
look at it.
absolutely. Whether it's technology and whether it's culture change, whether it's the people skills behind it, it's that influx, that bringing together of data skills, kind of platform and ecosystem that I think we'll talk about a little bit later as well. That's really what's going to drive sustained transformation and innovation.
We were kind of onto very early in the dialogue, and I don't think, maybe we're a little bit ahead of the market a little bit, but topics around trust and
yes.
risk profiles of enterprises. And now, with the consumer base that's out there today, the employee base that's out there today, these topics are so paramount now.
Could not agree more. Great point there on trust, and for me that's a massively important area. And one of the things I've been following quite closely, I've done some research myself with Edinburgh University about this, but also Enderman have brought out some research as a benchmark, monitoring trust over basically the last 17 years. And there's a global low, and it doesn't matter if it's financial services or the charity sector, it's affecting every area of business and beyond. So just wondered about your thoughts on that, because I think it's something that's affecting every consumer and every stakeholder at the moment.
Yeah, I mean we're at an all-time low. There's no question. You're right. It's across every institution, that we've held near and dear to our hearts.
Yes.
Personal, professional, doesn't matter. And I think you see it on the brand loyalty surveys that come out.
Absolutely.
It really is an issue everywhere. And I'm not so sure if companies taking the time to try to restore trust,
yes.
I think they have to do it, but I think if that becomes kind of a singular focus, I'm not so sure that we even have enough data to understand how to do that at this point in time. So I think it's more kind of building block.
Yes.
Don't do things that are going to set you back.
Yes.
Do the right things right.
Absolutely.
And just start, getting some momentum. And proving it. If you should, hit a bump or you should have an issue, then, call yourself out on it, address it, and then try to move on from there.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And for me, I think the big point is to make sure anything that's done to do trust is all about embedding it. It can't be an add-on. It can't be a tick the box exercise. It has to be part and parcel of what we do. And I think blockchain has an interesting point to play there. And maybe it's misunderstood. I think there's still quite a big conflation. It's probably an understatement with things like cryptocurrency. But what do you think about trust as a way to maybe embed trust back into the system using technology?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a perfect way to do it. But I think, the challenge is, we can't offload trust, just onto the technology,
exactly.
right?
Yes.
I mean, I think what you alluded to before. I think, you need the mindset, you need the leadership at a company really believing that trust is important. You need your board aligned to that trust mission. But by all means, and I think blockchain is a great example of something that just, kind of, reeks of trust, if you will, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, if you can get that in place, sure, it's an enabler, it's an augmenter, and I think those things that can certainly help us and call us out when there's a problem, with trust.
Absolutely, I think that's a very good point. And also circling back to AI, I think maybe the marriage, for want of a better way of putting it, the marriage of blockchain and AI in the future, probably still too nascent at the moment, but I think that could be very, very interesting in terms of giving that trust in data and who you share it with, but also using AI for more the nuanced insights later on as well. I think it could be really exciting dynamic for innovation around that.
We had a great conversation not that long ago, Sally, which, and I took kind of a little bit of a, perhaps a controversial position, and I said, I really think this negative focus around AI is actually a good thing for us right now, because it's forcing the topics to come out, it's forcing the dialogue, it's helping us establish swim lanes, that are acceptable to us and not acceptable to us. I think it'll start to inform more of the legislative requirements in countries as well. So while, the negative's a negative, and absolutely we've got to pivot much more towards the positive because there's so much more benefit. But at the same time, I think this dialogue is really a healthy thing right now.
I think you're right, absolutely, because if we don't do that now, where there are issues, so things like AI ethics and making sure we've got that diversity of experience in who's building AI, if we don't talk about it now, that could get left behind. So I totally agree with you. But it's also great to be able to kind of change the narrative around tech for good, for example, as well, which, as you know, is kind of close to my heart. So I think if whether you're a CIO or a CDO or CTO, whichever way we look at transformation and innovation, it's really that bringing together of leadership skills, of cultural alignment, of technology, that foresight activity, and making sure you're not leaving one of those behind. It's bringing that embedment all together.
Yeah. And that's what we call applied innovation.
Absolutely. Yeah, perfect. Thank you so much.
Thank
really
you,
enjoyed
Sally.
speaking to you
It's a
today.
pleasure.
Absolute pleasure.